Yes. 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 Oh my goodness. Woo. Oh, that's powerful. I think we could go home now, right? Oh my goodness. Well, good morning again. Hello, hello, hello. It's so good to be here with all of you. If you can use anything, Lord, you can use me. And I know as I look at your faces, I know so many of you are affirming and knowing and living from that reality, from that prayer, allowing yourselves to be used, transforming the planet, transforming the people that are in your lives, transforming your planet, your families, transforming the people that are within the sphere of your influence. So we are in our series, Toward Our Wholeness, the Wisdom of the Tao. And in week one, we started with the whole world in your hand. And I looked at this idea in the verse that says we have to unite our male side with our female side. We have to unite our light side with our dim or dull side, recognizing that these seeming opposites, when we bring them together, we get to this place that Lao Tzu calls the great unity. And out of that great unity, then we operate from unlimited power. And as we look at what's happening in our country politically, and particularly those of us that are on the progressive or liberal side, there's a recognition that there are factions within this side that we actually need to unite if we want to be as powerful as we can be. And if we want to create the world that works for everyone, we need to unite each of these sides. And that's how we then begin to operate in great power. Last week, the hidden creator. We looked at this idea that Lao Tzu talks about, the hidden creator. She is the gateway to the secret source of everything, to the treasure, to the Tao. And recognizing as we look at the creative process, spirit, mind, and body, and mind being the feminine, that thing which can take any idea and give birth to it, we have to understand who she is. We have to come to respect her. We have to come to love her and know her intimately so that we can create effortlessly, easily, and elegantly. Remember this week, this is the version of the text that we're using, the Tao Te Ching. It's the Lao Tzu, the Jonathan Starr translation, the Lao Tzu translation, right? It's the Jonathan Starr translation. This is the version that we're using. So if you want to check this out later, come and see me. But this is the cover. That's what it looks like. Okay, available in all formats. So we're going to be looking at a couple different verses in the Tao today, and I encourage you, for those that are doing some study on your own, to study verses 67 through 69. But there are really three different verses that we're going to look at today that are talking about the warrior. I find it very interesting that Lao Tzu talks about the warrior. In verse 31, we read this: "Even the finest warrior is defeated when he goes against natural law. By his own hand he is doomed, and all creatures are likely to despise him." In verse 68 we read, "The best warrior leads without haste, fights without anger, overcomes without confrontation, puts himself below, and brings out the highest in his men. This is the virtue of not confronting, of working with the abilities that you have, of complying with the laws of heaven. This is the ancient path that leads to perfection." And then verse 69, and this is only a portion of that verse. "There is no greater misfortune than feeling I have an enemy. For when I and enemy exist together, there is no room left for my treasure. Thus, when two opponents meet, the one without an enemy will surely triumph." So today we're going to talk about the way of the warrior, and there's a couple things. In what I just read, there's a couple things that I want to pull out that we're going to deal with in different ways. As we hear the words of Lao Tzu, he writes and he tells us that the way of the warrior, one, the warrior works with the law. Warrior, not warrior. Works with the law. And he calls it natural law, which is very important. I invite you to go back to a couple years back. We did the series, What is New Thought? And I think it's the second message in that series is natural law, talking about the truth that spiritual law is natural law, right? Now, he also goes on and he says that the warrior leads without haste, which means that the warrior is patient, not hurried or not rushing. And if you look in the dictionary, it says that a word that's related to haste is hustle. So it means that the warrior doesn't hustle. We also get from this reading then that the warrior fights without anger, succeeds without confrontation, and finally, in the last piece that I read, has no enemy. So let's deal with this first part, working with the law. This is something that's classic New Thought, right? That we have to work with the law, not against the law. The law is always in operation. It's always working. There is a law that whether we're conscious or unconscious of it, our thoughts, our expectations, and our beliefs are being outpictured in our lives. But when we work with the law, it's like this. Ernest Holmes writes in The Science of Mind, the gardener does not will potatoes and cabbage into being, but he or she has a willingness to comply with the law of nature and provides the conditions which make it possible for this law to produce them. Working with the law. Now, we understand that a gardener, a farmer, right? If he or she wants to plant potatoes, wants to have potatoes, then they go to a part of the world where potatoes grow, because you may not be able to grow potatoes everywhere, right? That's the first thing. And then they plant the potatoes, they water the ground, they make sure the soil is adequate. We know that. And so it would be absurd if somebody came to you and said, yeah, I'm thinking about growing some potatoes, and they're pulling out apple seeds. They would be working against the law, yes, yes? But how often do we do that in our own lives? Right, last week we talked about this idea that the idea from spirit, whether we're talking in the universal or in the individual, we have an idea, it's given to mind, and mind takes the pattern of the idea. Right? So often we give mind the I am prosperous idea, and then we're upset when the body turns out to not be prosperity. It turns out to be more bills and a negative bank account. And it's like, but I was affirming I am prosperous every day. Every day I've been saying, I was standing up clapping today, Pastor Greg, when we sang the song. But we recognize that there's a pattern underneath of, while we may be affirming I am prosperous, there's a subconscious belief of, yeah, but your mother ain't never have nothing. You've never seen prosperity. You don't know what financial prosperity looks like. And all of these other old and false beliefs, or somebody that looks like you can't have prosperity. All these sorts of things, right? Or there's a ceiling on your prosperity. There is no glass ceiling. There is no ceiling. And so we recognize that when we hold those beliefs, then we're not working with the law, we're actually working against the law. It would be like saying you want potatoes, but planting an apple seed. So we have to be clear about what we're doing, because the law works easily and effortlessly. The gardener does not will the potatoes and cabbage into being, but has a willingness to comply with the law of nature. Ernest Holmes goes on. The possibility of demonstrating does not depend upon environment, condition, location, personality, or opportunity. It depends solely upon our belief and our acceptance and our willingness to comply with the law through which all good comes. Our willingness. And this is a process, because when we come to these teachings and we come to New Thought, initially there's a little resistance, right? I still remember. Wow, this was so long ago. I went to this workshop called No More 9 to 5. And it was a wonderful workshop, but basically he told me that I was responsible for all the foolishness in my life, and that if I wanted to change my life, I would have to change my thoughts. I was angry. I was mad at that man. But at the same time, I felt the truth of it, right? And honestly, it was some years before I began to accept that. That's when the seed was planted, right? But it took some time for me to really get into it. And so I understand that there's this moment where we have to come to a willingness to comply with the law through which all good comes into being, right? There has to be, eventually, we have to come to this place, and this is what we're doing in 4 T's, right? As we move through the steps, the first step is we come to the awareness that our lives have become unmanageable. Right? It's based on the steps from AA. Our lives have become unmanageable. And so we're willing to give up our lives to that thing which is greater than us, that knows all, that sees all, and wants to operate through us in greater and more powerful ways. And so that's where the willingness starts, to comply with the law. Ernest Holmes goes on. This science, the science of mind, does not promise something for nothing. It does, however, tell us that if we comply with the law complies with us. No man or woman can demonstrate peace and cling to unhappiness. She, her, or he can demonstrate resignation and call it peace, but it will not be peace. No man or woman can jump into the water and remain dry. This is contrary to law and to reason. No person whose entire time is spent in the contemplation of limitation can demonstrate freedom from such limitation. The law itself must be willing to give, because in so giving, life is self-expressed. Now, I love the practicality of this. When we talk about working with the law, nobody can jump in water and remain dry. It's practical, we know that. If you jumped in water with the expectation that you were going to be dry, everybody would think you were a little off, right? I'm trying to be nice. But how often in our lives do we jump in water spiritually and think we're going to remain dry? How often in our lives do we go out and we go out, here's a good example, right? We go out on date after date looking for that person. Meanwhile, you were criticizing yourself the whole day. You were talking about yourself like you're not a child of God. You were talking about yourself like you're not worthy. You were treating yourself in the most cruel way possible in your own thoughts and in your own mind. And then you're going out dating thinking something's going to be good. It can't work. It's like trying to jump in water thinking you're going to be dry. So we recognize that we have the opportunity to work with the law. And so then the opportunity in that example is first to get in that mirror and say, I love you. I love you, beautiful being, beautiful child of God. You are amazing. You are powerful. You are wonderful, just as you are. You are enough. Yes, yes. And you stay in that place till the feeling rises up, till you feel that and know that to be true. Then you go out on that date, and it's a different experience. Or if it's not up to your worthiness, your standard of worthiness, it's going to be really easy to be like, I'm done. Let's get the check. In love, it's really easy, right? Really easy. All right. So the warrior works with the law, but here we get into this next section, which is my favorite part. The warrior fights without anger. This is good. This is good. Now, anger is a beautiful emotion. It's informational. I love anger, right? Anger is wonderful. But here's the problem. If it's used as fuel or a catalyst for action, then anger becomes destructive. But if it is used as information, as a temperature gauge, as a barometer to understand what's going on within ourselves, it becomes constructive, because then it gives us something that we can use to shift and change. And as I began to think about that, it took me to one of my master teachers, Yoda. Because what does Yoda tell us about anger? He says that fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. And hate leads to suffering. When you read the wisdom of the Tao and you listen to the wisdom of Yoda, it sounds like the same voice. He goes on, he talks about when he was talking to Luke, he says, beware of the dark side. Anger, fear, aggression, the dark side of the force are they. Easily they flow, quick to join you in a fight. If once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. Consume you, it will. And I love that. It's interesting because when I talked about this idea that one of the things we see from Lao Tzu, that a warrior leads without haste. And here Yoda is saying that the anger, the dark path, the hate, all of that stuff, the dark side, it's easy to get on that side. It's real easy to get, quick and easy to get snatched up on that side. And so we recognize that anger, again, is informational. But if we use it to act from, it's destructive. Now, some may be saying, and shout out to our Course in Miracles students. I know y'all are having a wonderful time with Pastor Yolanda. Wonderful time, yes, yes. And you all have already dealt with these lessons, but it's my favorite, one of my absolute favorite lessons in the workbook. Because the Course in Miracles teaches us, I am never upset for the reason I think. And again, when you understand this, anytime I'm angry, I come back to that. I'm like, oh, I'm angry at him, or I'm angry at her, or I'm angry at this thing or this institution. But the truth is, this is informational. I am never upset for the reason I think. And then it goes on in the subsequent lessons. Why are you never upset or angry for the reason you think? Because you only see the past. Now, what does that mean? I'll use this example because this happens often. I have a teenager, and it's wonderful as a parent to be the parent of a teenager. And so what I find is sometimes, hey Malcolm, if you're watching, I love you. that I may get frustrated with something she does or doesn't do. But what I recognize is what generally happens is, in my mind, I go to, this is just like the last time, ... I only see the past. I'm not in the present. I'm not seeing what's going on. I'm not seeing her. I'm not seeing what she's really moving through or what's really happening. I'm not seeing why she made the choice that she made. I'm not being loving. I'm not being understanding. I'm living in the past and I'm pissed off. I'm never upset for the reason I think, because I only see the past. And so the opportunity is to understand that and then come to the present. Now, the Course says this: the only holy true thought one can hold about the past is that it's not here. I'm going to say that again. This is so important. This is so important. The only holy true thought one can hold about the past is that it's not here. The past is over. It can touch me not. To think about it at all is therefore to think about illusions, because it ain't real. The past is only a memory. And so what happens when we get triggered, and this is where I love the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, because he talks about how the body becomes the mind. And so what happens is, if I have that incident and I get triggered, I get upset, and I'm thinking about some past experience, what happens is your body becomes the mind, and so it begins to send all the chemicals through your body to put you back into that experience. But it's an illusion. It's not real. Your body is living in the past, literally living in the past, because it has a marker in your mind. It's created a marker of that time when you were upset, and then it recalls all of that in that moment. And that's what's happening. But the only holy true thought one can hold about the past is that it's not here. So that's the first place that we get to be able to shift. It's like, wait, the past is not here. When we sing I Am Here Now, in the bridge, I breathe in, I breathe out. I'm in the present moment now. I say it every week because it's important. The way to get out of that fear, doubt, and worry and anger is to come back to your breath and get present and say to yourself, I am never upset for the reason I think. I'm seeing only the past. And the truth is, the past is not here. I love that word, remember. Right? When we remember something, it's like Frankenstein. We're creating a new body. Member. My arms are my members. My legs are my members. And so when I remember, I'm recreating another body. And usually it is Frankenstein. So we recognize that we have this beautiful opportunity to operate as the warrior and to live without anger, or fight without anger, but using that anger informationally, and then we have power. So here's another one. The warrior succeeds without confrontation. It also talks about this idea of when I and enemy are put together, it's the worst thing in the world, right? The person who thinks they have an enemy is the one that loses. So I love this when we think about being a warrior and being a metaphysician, because what we come to understand, if we succeed without confrontation and recognize that we have no enemy, what we are doing is we are operating from the perspective and knowing that we are always and only experiencing the effect of our thoughts. So there's no one to confront except your own mind. The truth is, whether we work with the law or not, it is our minds, our thoughts that are projecting out in the world, right? And then we understand that life is a mirror. So again, what I'm seeing, I can criticize 45. I can, right? We can do that. But if I'm triggered, I got to ask, where in me am I seeing these behaviors? Where in me have I been thoughtless and careless? Where in me have I acted in the ways that he's just acting on this larger scale? But I got to own, what am I doing in my individual life? And so succeeding without confrontation, then everything and everyone becomes a teacher, becomes a friend, the still small voice inviting us to pay attention, an opportunity to live in the present. I love one of the things, I think it's missed, but it's so beautiful. It's right there in the text. When you read the story of Jesus, when he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? This was a pivotal moment, probably one of the most human moments we really see, one of, because he knows what's coming, right? He knows that he's being betrayed by Judas in the background, right, in that scene, and he knows that they're going to come to get him soon. He knows that the disciples, the rest of them, have no idea. They're just, sitting around eating and sleeping, not even protecting him, which they're supposed to be doing in that moment. And according to some stories, he's in anguish. This is where he's talking to God, and he's saying, take this cup from me. And he ends with this idea of not my will, but thy will be done. And it's said, according to certain recountings of that story, that he was in such anguish that he cried tears of blood. Now, what happens is he's in that moment, he moves through, right? He's operating as a warrior, and he moves through all of that. He realizes he's not upset for the reason he thinks. And he comes to thy will be done. And then after he comes to that place, that's when Judas shows up with the members of the Sanhedrin, and they're coming to take him. And what Jesus says is, come, friend. Come, friend, because he realizes that there was no need there was no confrontation. It wasn't needed. He was only meeting his own thoughts and what was going on in his own life, and he recognized that he had no enemy. Now, A Course in Miracles says it this way. Another one of my favorite lessons. This is probably number 2. If I'm never upset, the reason I think is number 1. Lesson 153. In my defenselessness, my safety lies. Succeeding without confrontation, having no enemy. Now, in A Course in Miracles, it says this: defenselessness is strength. It testifies to the recognition of the Christ in you. Perhaps you will recall the Course maintains that choice is always made between God's strength and your own weakness seen apart from him. This is so beautiful. I want y'all to hear this. The Course maintains that choice is always made between God's strength and your own weakness seen apart from him. And I want to make sure we understand what we're saying here, right? There is the strength of God, which is always flowing to and through you. But to the extent that you think you're separate from this thing, that's then when you feel or think that you're weak. And so the choice that you're always making is thinking you're weak, which means thinking you're separate from something that you can never be separate from, or accepting the truth that this power, this strength, this possibility, this greatness, that is God, the all that is source, that is love itself, beauty itself, harmony itself, is flowing into and through you, and then you are strong. And it goes on. Defenselessness can never be attacked because it recognizes strength so great, attack is folly or a silly game a tired child might play when he becomes too sleepy to remember what he wants. You know that little tantrum that kids throw? And you're like, oh, it's time for a nap. Oh, I see what's going on, right? And so we recognize that that's the energy that we're operating in when we think that we have to defend something, because we have not recognized the strength that is within us, the strength that is flowing through us. It says defenselessness recognizes a strength so great, attack is folly or a silly game. And so the only reason that we become defensive is because we think we can be hurt or harmed. What is there to defend if you can't be hurt or harmed? Think about it. And we have all been defensive, right? We have all built up walls. Some of us have built a wall for our lifetime. And so we have things that we say. If they do one more thing, let them look at me again like that. I wish they would. Defenses. And so in that moment, we are not recognizing that the power of God, the Christ, is dwelling within us. We're not recognizing that. We're not recognizing this strength so great that attack is folly. In the text it goes on, it says, defensiveness is weakness. It proclaims you have denied the Christ and have come to fear the Father's anger. What can save you now from your delusion of an angry God whose fearful image you believe you see at work in all the evils of the world? What but illusions could defend you now when it is but illusions which you fight? Very interesting. So then what happens is when we're in the defensive place, it's just an illusion fighting an illusion. Somebody on this side believes that they can be hurt, and you on this side believe you can hurt. Both lies, and lies are fighting each other. That's all that's happening. And when we blow that out in the world, that's all that's happening with so much of the discord that's happening between nations, and discord that's happening between in committed relationships, the discord that's happening between parent and child. Name any relationship, it's the same thing. That's actually an interesting, this is a little aside, but it's an interesting thing when you think about, and this happens in almost every relationship, but I'm thinking about the parent-child relationship. There's a little bit of resentment that happens, and I think we all as adults have to heal ourselves from it, because think about it. You're this little person that can't, buy your own clothes and do all the things that you need to do to take care of yourself. You have to depend on this other being that may or may not show up in the way that you really need to show up, right? Or just because we're all human is gonna make a mistake. And there's a level of resentment that shows up that, like, I gotta act nice, I gotta be quiet, I gotta be still, just so I can get fed and get some clothes. When you think about the dynamic that happens, right? It's a power dynamic, right? Now, here's what's interesting. On the other side, as parents, there can also be a resentment because parents feel embarrassed if they're not still, right? You feel like it's a reflection on you if your child isn't doing what they're supposed to do. It's a reflection on you if your child isn't acting a certain way. And so there's also a level of resentment, like, this being is gonna make me look bad if they don't act right, and I can't control them. If I'm really truly honest, I can't control them. So that's why parents do all these foolish things like corporal punishment and trying to beat their child into submission. The truth is, you can't control another being. Nobody can. And so there's this interesting dynamic that happens. And again, so then you have illusion against illusion. What if we begin to shift our relationship and thoughts? Again, as adults, we may need to heal this idea, heal any latent resentment that we have, that we had to depend on these folk. Human folks that hopefully they did a good job, but everybody makes mistakes. And then as parents, we forgive ourselves, right? We forgive ourselves for the mistakes that we may have made. And we forgive ourselves for even the subconscious ways we may have been in resentment to those little beings. So I want to end with this. This idea of defense. In verse 67, not one of the verses that we talked about today, but I think it's so appropriate. At the end of the verse, Lao Tzu writes, "Love vanquishes all attackers. It is impregnable in defense." When heaven wants to protect someone, does it send an army? No, it protects him with love. And so the truth of life still and always is, we keep coming back to this. We started in the first week with this. Understanding what agape, what that Greek word really is all about. This love that's a willingness, an undying willingness to restore community no matter what. That's what agape love is. We have the different aspects of love as we look in the Greek. We have the romantic love. We have the familial love, or the brotherly, sisterly love. And then there's this love that represents this undying unity. And from this awareness of love, this is what heaven sends when heaven wants to protect someone. And so in verse 69 we read, "Advance, but do not use your feet. Seize, but do not use your arms. Cut, but do not use your sword. Fight, but do not use your own power. The warrior works within." Yes, there may be a battle that you have to wage, but the battle will always and only be within your own being, within your own mind. If you want to slay somebody, slay something, slay them old beliefs, please. Slay that worry. If you want to seize somebody, seize that belief of unworthiness. If you want to fight somebody or something, can you please fight the doubt that you can't succeed? Cancel it. That's where the warrior works. And when we do that, we are always successful. I invite everybody to stand. And so we take a deep breath in and out. Mother, Father, God, source of all, creator of all, the foundation and back of, behind, and underneath all things, love itself, beauty itself, all power, all knowledge and wisdom, omnipresence, you are everywhere present. The power and the majesty of the mountains are you made manifest. The light and glory of the sun is your light being made manifest. The twinkle in the stars is your twinkle, your glow being made manifest. The sound that comes forth through us as our voice is your sound. The rushing of the wind is your rushing. The crispness of this fall air is you in the air. You are everywhere present, Mother, Father, God. And as I recognize your presence, I recognize my union and unity with that thing. For I know I am one with you. I know that I am your child, created perfect, whole, and complete. And I know that that reality is not just my reality, but is the truth of each and every one of my sisters and brothers that are here right now. My sister, my brother, you are one with the one. You are one with God. You are one with all power, all wisdom, all knowledge. You are one with strength itself. You are one with supply. You are one with abundance. You are one with the light of the world, for you are the very light of the world, and it exists down to the very cellular level of your being. Your cells know who and what they are. Divine, holy structures. And as we stand in the recognition of knowing who and what we are, knowing this oneness, knowing this great unity, I now speak this word in faith and speak this word in truth. I am grateful for the warriors that are here. The metaphysical warriors that are here, the spiritual warriors that understand something true about life, that understand that we work with the law, not against the law. And right here and now, I see you working with that law. I see you planting good seeds and good ideas into the mind of God. And the mind of God is giving birth to them easily and effortlessly. I see you planting worthiness. And more experiences and examples of your worthiness are showing up out in your life. I see you planting, I am prosperous, and I am prosperous, and I am prosperous. And prosperity is showing up in your relationships. And prosperity is showing up in your finances. And prosperity is showing up when you go to work. And prosperity is showing up when you come to church. And prosperity is showing up on the subway, and prosperity is showing up on the sidewalk. I see you planting those seeds right here and right now. I see you planting the seeds of forgiveness. I see you planting the seeds of a healed family and healed relationships and healed ties. And so right here and right now, that phone call is coming from a family member that you haven't heard from in many, many years, and the conversation is different and the feeling tone is different because you are different. I see you healing that thing right now. I see you planting seeds of healing in your body and healing in your mind. That condition, that diagnosis that you received is a fact, but it is not the truth. And so as you go back to the doctor says, I don't know what was going on, but everything is free and clear now. I see you receiving the diagnosis of healing. I see you healing and receiving the diagnosis that all is well in your body and in your mind. I see you planting the seeds of good. I see you planting the seeds of joy. And everywhere you go, there is nothing but joy. Joy in front of you, joy behind you, joy at your left, joy at your right, joy above you, and joy below you. Everywhere you look, there is joy, and it is good. And so right here and now, I release these words. I release this prayer, knowing that my word cannot return unto me void, knowing that the entire universe, all of life, is responding to this word, and this vibration is responding to my knowingness and my faith right now. And so I see it rushing to each and every one of us. I see the good conspiring on our behalf to bring forth this manifestation easily and effortlessly through the path of least resistance. So as I release this word, together we lift up our voices in celebration and we say, Amen, Ashe. And so it is. And so it is. Thank you, God. Thank you, God.